It's Mari here with another episode of Tried, Trendy, and True. Today I'm going to be using the gorgeous vintage rose collection from Crafter's Companion. I'm just going to give you a really quick walkthrough of this collection. This collection includes this really fun craft kit, and in this craft kit you actually get 3 pieces. You get a 3D embossing folder, a stamp set, and a die. So all of these different pieces are included in this little kit, but you can also buy those 3 pieces separately. So you can also get the really pretty stamp set, the 3D embossing folder, and this really fun lace border die separately as well. There's also a 6x6 pad that's included in this collection. This is just a beautiful paper pad. The Nature's Garden papers are always so pretty, and I almost feel like this collection has kind of a fall vibe to it. Even though it has like the pinks and greens, it does kind of remind me of autumn a little bit. This beautiful exquisite lace die set can be purchased as well as part of this collection. Really, really gorgeous. It's a square die that has that insert. This is the classic rose dies that you can use to die cut florals. This is the diamond trellis die set. Really pretty. You can also get a 2D embossing folder. This one's called Baroque Frame. This is the rose bouquet stamp and die set. Then there's a really pretty vellum pad that has a series of 24 pieces or sheets of really gorgeous 8x8 vellum. This is just beautiful. I'm going to take one of the pieces out here and just try to show you here the thickness of this paper. It's really, really pretty. It is translucent, so it's not completely transparent. Definitely has some heft to it. It's a really, really nice paper. And there's so many different ways to use vellum. I will be using some vellum in my layout today. There's also a pad of luxury linen cardstock as well. This includes 24 sheets of 8.5 by 11 textured cardstock. It's beautiful. I'm just going to fan this out here so that you can see all of the really pretty colors that are included in this pad, and they coordinate beautifully with the Nature's Garden vintage rose paper pads. So the pattern paper just coordinates beautifully with these lovely colors that are in the 8.5 by 11 cardstock. This is the 12 by 12 pad. There's 36 sheets of 180 GSM paper in this pad. You get 3 sheets of each one of the different patterns. They're gorgeous. I've already pulled some of the paper out of the pad for my project today, but you can just see how pretty these papers are. They're just really lovely and definitely have that vintage feel. So I think that the title of this collection is obviously very appropriate, Vintage Rose. You can just see all those really pretty florals throughout, and just gorgeous for all of your different types of projects that you might be doing. If you're making cards, if you're doing scrapbooking projects, perhaps you're making some DIY projects where you're making gift boxes or gift bags, any of those sorts of things. It's really nice to have 12 by 12 paper, so you have that extra size or real estate, so to speak, to work with when you're doing different kinds of projects. So I really love this collection, and I was really excited to work with it today to create a scrapbooking layout. So now that we've seen all of the pieces of the collection, I've chosen out these papers here and a piece of black 12 by 12 cardstock to frame out some of the papers for my project. I wasn't sure exactly if I wanted to just use a white card base, which is something that I typically do when I'm working on a scrapbooking layout, but I also really badly wanted to use this pattern paper for my base as well. So I've sized down 2 of the 12 by 12 papers, just a little bit smaller than my 12 by 12 black cardstock, so that I do have 2 of these papers to kind of make a frame. Now, I didn't take the time to gut these papers, but I definitely could have gut the center out of that black and the next largest pattern paper there, just to preserve some of that extra paper. I didn't take the time to do that, but if you are really trying to, conserve your paper, which is a good idea, definitely go ahead and take the time to do that. I am just using my Crafter's Companion dot runner here to adhere these papers together, and you can just see how just that slight variation in size allows these papers to just create these mats and layers so that we do have the nice framed appearance for the base for our project. I'll set that aside and start to work on the rest of the layout here. Now I am going to use a piece of white cardstock to die cut out that gorgeous trellis die. This die set is 5.5 by 5.5 inches. I wasn't sure how many photos I was going to use, so I did die cut out 4 of those to layer together for 2 separate mats. Now this is a stacking die from Crafter's Companion that's obviously square, perfect for cutting out mats for your layouts. I'm going to just go ahead and cut out from this green linen cardstock a couple of mats. And like I said, I wasn't sure right now at this point how many photos I wanted to do or the exact design. So I wanted to make these mats. And of course, if I have an extra, I'll just set that aside and put it with the paper and use that for another project. So I really love how that trellis die is going to create that nice white mat. And then I'm going to layer the green cardstock over a larger square of the vellum to complete my photo mat layers here. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim this out with my scissors, run that through my die cutting machine, and now you can just see how easy it is to die cut out your mats for a square photo. So now that I've got those all ready to go, I'm just going to set those aside and start to think about what I want to do next. So I grabbed a piece of 12 by 12 Vicki Boutin Foundations paper from my stash, and what I decided I wanted to do is create a focal point behind my flowers, or sorry, behind my photo that's going to include 3 strips of paper. So I'm going to cut my 12 by 12 paper that I've chosen into 3-inch strips, and I wanted to be really specific which strip of paper I used from this paper because I really like those green butterflies, so I wanted to make sure I used that strip. I chose out 2 other papers from the 12 by 12 pad, including that one that's got more green space on it. I'm going to use the back side of this paper here that's got the stripes on it just to break up the florals a little bit with the strips that are in the background. So now I have these 3 strips that are essentially 12 by 3 inches. And what I'm going to do is roll the bottom section of each one of these 3 papers. So I have this clear plastic straw that I have in my craft room. It's a really stiff straw out of some cup that I have in my kitchen, and I just took the straw and I leave it in my craft room for rolling paper. So what I do is I just roll the paper around the straw, and then when I'm happy with the length of the paper, I just go ahead and put a piece of really sticky double-sided tape in there. This is some Sukwang, I think this is a 1/4 inch double-sided tape, and I'm just going to put that in and then roll over top of it once I have the release paper off, and that is going to really keep that rolled paper in place. And you'll notice, possibly you can see this on camera, I'm really applying a lot of pressure when I push the paper onto the double-sided tape. And when I'm rolling this, I just try to make sure that I roll it back and forth a little bit to really shape the paper nicely. And there you can just see I'm pushing that double-sided tape down. I'll take the release paper off, and now I'll just roll my straw over top of that double-sided tape and give it a really good press. And that's really going to adhere down. And I've done this with other layouts before, and it does not let go. It does stay adhered for a long time. I've never had any of my paper rolled projects come apart, so that's good news. This double-sided tape is really super strong. So I wanted to make sure that these papers are all different lengths because I don't want them to all just go straight across the same length. So what I'll do once I have these all rolled up is I'll take a look and see what the best length of each of the papers is, and then I'll trim them off accordingly. So I have left them the full 12 inches in length so that I do have some space to play. My hand was kind of getting sore at this point, but it's totally worth it. I love the look of the rolled paper. I think it's a really great way to add some dimension and texture to a project. So now I've got those all rolled. I'm just going to look at them and eyeball them here and just see what I want the placement to be, varying the lengths of the paper. And I'm sorry I'm off out of frame there just a little bit. but I will move this down soon. I'm just going to mark with my pencil where I need to trim these papers. I'll just bring in my little guillotine trimmer here and trim these up. And then in that way, I'm going to have just the right length of paper. So I did make sure that I put the photo mat in the center there so that I was mindful of, how this was going to look with the photo mat, ensuring that there's enough space on the patterned paper, on the rolled pattern paper background for the photo mat to sit on top. So now I've got some Gina K inks out here that I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending with. I've got some light spruce and dusty rose that I'm going to be using. I also added some sewing with my sewing machine to the tops of each one of those 3-inch strips of paper as well. I'm going in with that really pretty pink from Gina K, the dusty rose, and I'm just going to blend on some ink around where the paper is going to be in the background, and just wanted to create a little bit of color back there. I wouldn't have had to do this, but I just felt like I wanted to add a little bit of interest to the background as well, to that white paper. And I'm actually going to continue using that pink ink around this whole area. So you'll just see me dabbing off some of the ink over to the right there on that piece of extra white paper, just ensuring that I don't get too dark of an area with that pink or that it's splotchy in any way. I really like the Gina K ink because it does kind of level itself out. It's super easy to blend with. It is just a really lovely ink. I love my Gina K inks for sure. And you can just see here that I'm blending on that really pretty pink color. Really like how that looks. And I just kept putting the paper back onto the pattern paper back onto the white, just to make sure that it was going to be the right amount in the right area of that pink ink. Now I'm just taking some water and splattering it on with my hand onto the ink, and the Gina K ink is water reactive, so you will be able to see it's going to just look a little bit distressed. It's very subtle, but it is there. I like how that looks, and I'm just going to dry that quickly before I go on to the next step. So this is just my heat tool here that just applies some really nice light heat, and it just quickly dries that for me. Now I'm going to go in with a light spruce. I'm just going to put a little bit of it onto my craft mat. I'll get that wet, add a little bit of water to that just with my water spritzer. And then I'll just take a small brush and I'll go ahead and splatter some of this green ink over top of the pink, just to add some of that green back in. And again, this is very subtle. It's going to be hardly even noticeable, but it's there, and it does add just that little bit of subtle extra detail in your background. So if you are afraid of using any sort of mixed media on your projects, this is a really great way to start. There's just a very small amount of very subtle mixed media here. You're hardly going to be able to see it, but I do like that there's just that little bit of extra detail. So once I'm finished with that, and that's looking the way that I want it to, I want to add some stamping. So I'm going to go to that Vintage Rose stamp. I've got that on my Scrapbook on Cards Today block, and my stamping block here. I'm going to stamp a little bit of this text in the background using that Vintage Rose stamp. Now I'm going to grab my Honeybee Stamps Gold ink. I love this metallic gold for stamping. It's beautiful. And I'm going to go ahead and just stamp this in a few different areas around where my photo mats and pattern papers are. I'm going to do some stamping here, and I'm also going to use some 2nd and 3rd generation stamping. I don't have to re-ink up that stamp. This ink stays very wet for a long time. So I'm going to just go ahead and make sure that I use up as much of that ink that I have on the stamp. So you'll see me right away here. I think I'm just grabbing a piece of copy paper to blot off the extra ink there, just to make sure that that's dry and doesn't transfer or get smudged. So I'll just do that again with my copy paper and just make sure that it's not moving. And now I'll just take that stamp again. I'll stamp that text down at the bottom where it's just going to peek out around my pattern paper and over to the side. So you can even see 2nd and 3rd generation. I'm still getting some ink transfer from that stamp. Again, I'm going to just take some copy paper, pick up any excess. You could also dry this, whichever works for you. And again, I'm going to lay everything back onto the project and make sure that I like how things are looking. So this does take some time, but I do like doing this when I'm working through my process. Is just, putting things off, taking things off, putting things on, making sure that the placement is just right. Now, I wasn't finished with the stamping at this point. I wanted to stamp some more with that really awesome stamp set from Vintage Rose. So there are some postage mark stamps in that set. I'm going to go in with the Gina K Soft Stone and do some stamping with that particular stamp. So I'm going to do some here over to the side. Again, with my SCT stamping blocks. I love those blocks. And I like how that looks, but I want to repeat that stamping as well. So just using the idea of repetition here on the project as well. I'm going to stamp that up at the top. And I just like that detail that adds to the background. So I'm just checking that out, making sure I like how that looks. I'm thinking about what else I want to add at this point. I'm going back to the stamp set and thinking about what else I can add for stamping. So this stamp here from the set is supposed to kind of look like ink blots or ink splotches or paint splotches, whatever you want to call them. And I'm going to go again in with that gold metallic and do some stamping with that. I love that. I think that's very cool. I love the idea of mark making on my backgrounds. This stamp set is fantastic for that because there's so many different types of textures on the stamp set. So I like how that looks. Pardon me. Again, I'm going to blot up the excess ink with a piece of copy paper, and then I'll repeat the stamping over on the right side as well. So I've put my paper back onto the layout just to see where that stamp placement should be. Now I did die cut that lace border from Vintage Rose from some white cardstock, and I'm thinking about adding it maybe here, but I actually end up moving the placement later. I'm going to take some VersaFine Claire ink in, I think this is called Morning Mist. It's a little bit darker than the soft stone. And I'm going to lay that over top of that postage mark. So this is just a cancellation stamp, and love how that looks. So now that's all dry. I'm going to take my paper distresser tool from Tonic, and I'm just going to go ahead and rough up the edges of the papers. And just kind of do this so that they kind of look a little bit tattered and distressed. And I'll do that on the different sides of all three of those strips. Now I've marked the center of the paper across the top at 6 inches. And I'm going to start laying down my papers here. And I want to do that by adding a little bit of dimension. I'm going to add some foam adhesive to the backs of each one of these 3 strips. So at this point, I'm kind of just eyeballing where I want this for sure. And I'll add the strips of the foam adhesive onto the back of these pattern papers. And I'll take the backer off those foam strips and then go ahead and add that on. And this is, this foam adhesive is 3L, the big roll, the big mama roll of the foam adhesive. Now I'm just taking my T-square ruler and ensuring that this is straight. And then I'll be ready to do the same thing to the other strips. Now I am going to do the same thing with each of these in that I will place them and then I'll grab my T-square ruler and just make sure that that's on there straight. I love that paper. It's so pretty. The combination of the pink and green is just absolutely gorgeous. Really, really pretty paper. I'm again just going to put this one down, trying to ensure the top is a slightly different height. You will notice that the rolled portion looks a little bit kind of across from each other a little bit, but it is slightly off. And again here with a T-square ruler just to make sure that it's straight. And it's a good thing that I did because I believe this one was not straight and I had to just shift it over slightly and straighten it up. My T-square ruler is one of my most used tools for sure in my scrap space. Now I decided to move these little lacy borders to a closer proximity to the photo. So I'm just going to move them so that they overlay the pattern paper slightly. Because of all of the holes in that lacy detail, you can definitely still see the paper in the background. Now at this point I've decided that I am going to use the black and pattern paper as my mat for this. It definitely could have just been left as a white background, but I wanted to use those other papers as well for my mat. So I'm sizing down the white paper slightly. I did have to use my craft mat and blade for cutting this side because of that rolled paper. It wouldn't fit into the trimmer, but I just traced a line or drew a line with my ruler where I needed to cut it, and then I just used the cutter, the blade and my mat there to cut that. So now I've got this all trimmed out to the right size so that it fits really nicely onto those matted layers. I really like how that frames it out. It would have looked good either way, but I do like the frame around the edges as well. Just finishes it off nicely. So now I'm going to just take those lacy pieces and add those onto either side of the photo. And I actually grabbed some die cuts from the American Crafts crepe paper collection from Maggie Holmes' Woodland and Grove, which actually really coordinates nicely with the Vintage Rose collection. I took a few of the die cut flowers from that collection just to add a few little floral details. And I'm just going to pop those up on some foam adhesive. I'm using some of the little stickers as well, just to put diagonally some little details on each of the different corners diagonally from each other. So starting with the bottom left corner and then the top right, just adding in some little clusters of florals in that way. It draws your eye through to the focal point, the photo, obviously. And I really like how that adds some nice detail to the project. Now I did take a sticker from that collection, the Woodland and Grove, as well, to add a little title to my project just under the photo. I'm going to pop that up on some foam adhesive as well. And at this point, I think I was looking for some adhesive that's a little bit thicker. I really wanted to use the Sticky Thumb foam dots from American Crafts. I like them because they are super, super thick. And wherever you need a little bit of extra dimension, those are a really great adhesive to have in your stash. So I'm just going to go ahead and add those in some of the areas where I just want that extra little bit of thickness, and just going to pop up each of these little bits here. Just going to really try to create that extra little bit of dimension with that foam adhesive in that way. So you'll just see me adding that to the bottoms of the florals and those little buds. Really like how that looks. And of course that's going to adhere those pieces onto the project as well. So I didn't use any other adhesive other than these foam bits that I'm adding to adhere those florals down. Now this is that little sticker piece that I mentioned that I'm going to use for my title here. And just love how that finishes it off. It just adds a little bit of wood graining in. And I'm just going to, there's just that perfect place to add that down at the bottom of the photograph. I like that it's that rectangle shape again. I think it looks nice in that spot. And I've added that Sticky Thumb, really thick foam adhesive on the back of that as well to adhere that down. So I really like how that looks. I like how that finishes it off. I think the project is looking pretty good at this point, but what I wanted to do now is just do a little bit of extra distressing on the paper edges. So I'm just going to go and add, just some little tears and a little bit of texture, rough up the edges with my fingernail, kind of roll up the little leaves a little bit and just give them that little bit of extra dimension. Now I'm just going to take my fingernail and run that along that edge of that white paper. Again, just creating that little bit of extra texture, just so that things don't look quite as flat. And it's just going to finish that off nicely. Just finish that there. And that is going to finish that part. Now I wanted to add some white splatter, so I have covered up the photo and anything with text on it. And I'm just going to go through and add a generous amount of this. This is some Dina Wakley gloss spray in white. You could water down some acrylic paint in your stash or some gouache, whatever you have that's a white pigment that would work for splattering. And I just really like to add the white splatter. I think it adds a really nice cohesive element to the entire project, and it just adds a little bit of white overlay over top of some of the darker areas, and then the white on the white paper. Love that look as well. This dries really dimensional, so I love that element of the gloss spray. I think it just looks great. And I'm just going to splatter away until I've used up all of that pigment that I did pour out onto my craft mat. And once I'm done splattering that, I will take it out of my box here and set it aside to really let it dry. But the nice thing about this product is it dries pretty quick, as does most acrylic paint. So once I'm finished, I will just let this have a little bit of drying time. And then I'm going to show you close up here what this looks like when it's all finished. So there you have it. That's the finished project today. Friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you were inspired. I really love the Vintage Rose collection from Crafter's Companion. I think it is gorgeous. Have an amazing day, friends, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.